Hello, this is Patient X Files, where the rare becomes real. The man who felt others' pain. I never told anyone this before, but I can feel your pain. Literally. When you stub your toe, mine throbs. When you get a paper cut, I bleed inside. When someone slaps you across the face, my cheek burns like fire. I know it sounds impossible, like some twisted superpower from a comic book, but this is my reality. Every single day. My name is David, and I have something called mirror touch synesthesia. But that clinical term doesn't even begin to capture the hell I live in. Imagine walking through a crowded street and feeling every bump, every jostle, every accidental elbow to the ribs as if it were happening to your own body. Imagine sitting in a coffee shop and suddenly doubling over in agony because the person 3 tables away just burned their tongue on hot coffee. Imagine watching a movie and having to leave the theater because the fight scenes make you feel like you're being beaten to death. That's my world. That's been my world for as long as I can remember. The first time I realized something was wrong, I was 7 years old. My younger sister Emma fell off her bike and scraped her knee badly. As she sat there crying, blood trickling down her leg, I felt this sharp, stinging pain in my own knee. I looked down, expecting to see an identical wound, but my skin was perfectly intact, clean, unblemished. Yet the pain was so real, so vivid, that I started crying too. My mother thought I was just being dramatic, showing sympathy for my sister. "That's very sweet of you, honey," she said. "But Emma's the one who's hurt." If only she knew that I was hurt too. In ways that no bandage could fix. The episodes became more frequent as I grew older. In middle school, during a particularly brutal dodgeball game, I collapsed on the gymnasium floor. Not because I'd been hit, but because I felt every single impact that landed on my classmates. Each rubber ball that struck someone else's body sent waves of phantom pain through mine. The coach thought I was having some kind of seizure. The school nurse called my parents. I tried to explain what I was feeling, but the words sounded crazy even to me. "I felt Tommy get hit in the stomach," I whispered to my mother in the nurse's office. "And when Sarah got nailed in the back, I felt that too. It's like their bodies are connected to mine somehow." My mother's face went pale. She exchanged worried glances with the nurse. They scheduled appointments with doctors. Lots of doctors. Neurologists ran tests on my brain. Psychiatrists asked me about my childhood. Psychologists made me draw pictures and talk about my feelings. Everyone had theories. Nobody had answers. Some suggested I was seeking attention. Others thought I might be developing early signs of schizophrenia. One particularly dismissive doctor told my parents I was probably just overly sensitive and would grow out of it. I didn't grow out of it. If anything, it got worse. High school was a nightmare. Teenage boys are naturally violent creatures, constantly roughhousing, play fighting, accidentally hurting each other in sports. Every football practice was torture for me. Every wrestling match in gym class left me curled up in a bathroom stall, overwhelmed by phantom injuries. I felt every tackle, every slam against the mat, every accidental elbow to the face. The worst part wasn't the physical pain, though. It was the isolation. How do you explain to people that you literally feel their pain? How do you tell your friends that their minor injuries become your major trauma? How do you date someone when every time they get a headache, you get one too? I tried to hide it. I developed elaborate coping mechanisms. I learned to recognize the early signs of someone getting hurt and would quickly look away or leave the room. I avoided crowded places, contact sports, anything that might expose me to other people's physical trauma. I became a ghost in my own life, constantly fleeing from human connection because connection meant pain. My parents were supportive, but they didn't understand. How could they? They lived in a world where pain belonged to the person experiencing it, where suffering was individual, contained, manageable. They couldn't comprehend a reality where one person's discomfort became everyone's burden. College offered some relief. I chose a small liberal arts school where I could control my environment better. I studied literature, spending most of my time alone with books. Books didn't feel pain. Characters might suffer, but their agony stayed safely contained within the pages. For a few precious hours each day, reading transported me to a world where I could experience emotion without physical trauma. But even literature betrayed me sometimes. Violent scenes in novels would trigger phantom sensations. War stories left me feeling wounded. Crime thrillers made my body ache with imagined injuries. I had to abandon entire genres, whole sections of human storytelling because they hurt too much to consume. The loneliness was crushing. I watched my classmates form relationships, go to parties, play sports, live normal lives. Meanwhile, I existed on the periphery, always one painful experience away from complete overwhelm. I dated a few people, but how do you explain to someone that their stubbed toe ruins your entire evening? How do you have physical intimacy when every bump, every accidental scratch, every moment of roughness sends you spiraling? I remember one particularly devastating incident during my junior year. I was walking across campus when I saw a group of students gathered around something near the library. Curious despite myself, I approached to see what was happening. A maintenance worker had fallen from a ladder while trimming trees. He was conscious but clearly in pain, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. The moment I saw him, I felt it. The sharp, grinding agony of a broken bone. The throbbing ache that seemed to radiate from my leg up through my entire body. I tried to walk away, but the pain was so intense that I collapsed right there on the sidewalk. Students gathered around me too, thinking I'd also been injured somehow. Paramedics arrived and couldn't find anything wrong with me. My leg was perfectly fine, structurally speaking. But I felt that man's fracture as if it were my own. I spent 3 days in bed, unable to walk properly. Phantom pain shooting through my allegedly healthy leg. The university counselor suggested I was having a psychotic break. They wanted to admit me for psychiatric evaluation. Only my roommate's intervention saved me from that fate. He'd witnessed enough of my episodes to believe, if not understand, what I was experiencing. That's when I first heard the term mirror-touch synesthesia. My roommate, bless him, had done research. He found academic papers, medical studies, case reports of people who experienced exactly what I was going through. For the first time in my life, I had a name for my condition. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't broken, I was rare, but I wasn't alone. Mirror-touch synesthesia affects less than 2% of the population. It's a neurological condition where the brain's mirror neuron system is hyperactive. Most people have mirror neurons that fire when they observe others performing actions, helping us understand and empathize with what others are experiencing. In people like me, these neurons don't just fire for actions, they fire for sensations too. When I see someone get hurt, my brain literally experiences their pain as if it were happening to my own body. Learning about the scientific basis for my condition was both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it validated my experiences, gave them legitimacy, proved I wasn't delusional. Terrifying because I realized this wasn't something I would ever grow out of. This was my neurology. This was permanent. This was The research also revealed something else disturbing. People with mirror-touch synesthesia often have higher than average empathy levels. We don't just feel others' physical pain, we're more susceptible to emotional pain too. We're human sponges absorbing the suffering of everyone around us. It explains so much about my childhood, my adolescence, my constant overwhelming sense that the world was too harsh, too brutal, too painful to bear. Armed with this knowledge, I tried to build a life that accommodated my condition. After college, I moved to a small town in Vermont where life was quieter, gentler, less likely to assault me with unexpected trauma. I got a job as a freelance writer, working from home, controlling my environment. I adopted a cat named Whiskers who provided companionship without the complexity of human pain. For a few years, this worked. I was lonely but stable, isolated but functional. I developed routines that minimized my exposure to others' physical trauma. I shopped during off-peak hours when stores were less crowded. I avoided restaurants during busy periods. I never went to sporting events, concerts, or anywhere large groups of people might gather. I lived like a vampire, carefully navigating the world to avoid the sunlight of human suffering. But isolation has its own kind of pain, and eventually that pain became unbearable too. I was 32 when I met Sarah. She was a librarian at the local branch where I sometimes went to work when my home office felt too confining. She was quiet, gentle, careful in her movements. If I was going to connect with anyone, she seemed like the safest choice. Our relationship developed slowly, cautiously. I didn't tell her about my condition at first. How could I? Even with scientific backing, it still sounded insane. Instead, I just tried to be extra careful around her, extra attentive to her physical well-being. If she had a headache, I'd quickly suggest remedies and retreat to another room. If she bumped into something, I'd immediately look away and make an excuse to leave. She must have thought I was the most neurotic person she'd ever met. 3 months into our relationship, everything fell apart in the most predictable way possible. We were hiking together, something I'd been avoiding but finally agreed to because she loved nature so much. She was walking ahead of me on the trail when she slipped on some loose rocks and fell hard, scraping her hands and knees on the rough path. The pain hit me instantly. Sharp gravel grinding into my palms, my kneecaps exploding with fiery agony. I screamed and fell to the ground beside her, clutching my own hands and knees, writhing in phantom pain that was somehow completely real. Sarah stared at me in complete confusion. She was hurt, bleeding slightly, but her injuries were minor. Meanwhile, I was incapacitated, sobbing, unable to function. She tried to help me to understand what was wrong, but I couldn't explain. Not then. Not while her pain was consuming me. That night, I finally told her everything. About my condition, about the years of hiding, about why I sometimes acted so strangely around her. I expected her to leave. I expected her to think I was crazy, manipulative, attention-seeking. All the things previous doctors had suggested. Instead, she listened, really listened, and then she asked the question that changed everything. How can I help? Not, are you sure this is real? Not, have you considered therapy? Just, how can I help? For the first time in my adult life, I had a partner who was willing to navigate the world with my limitations in mind. Sarah learned to move more carefully around me, to warn me if she was hurt, to help me develop better coping strategies. She researched my condition, connected with support groups, even found a therapist who specialized in unusual neurological conditions. More importantly, she helped me realize that my empathy, while overwhelming wasn't entirely a curse. My ability to feel others' pain made me incredibly attentive to suffering. I could tell when people were hurt before they even spoke. I could offer comfort that came from genuine, literal understanding of their experience. We started volunteering together at a local animal shelter. Animals, I discovered, triggered my synesthesia less intensely than humans. I could feel when a dog was in pain, but it was more manageable, less overwhelming. Working with injured animals became a way for me to use my condition constructively, to help creatures who couldn't articulate their suffering. Through Sarah, I also began connecting with other people who had mirror-touch synesthesia. Online support groups, forums, even a few in-person meetings. For the first time in my life, I was around people who truly understood. People who nodded knowingly when I described the phantom pain, the overwhelming empathy, the isolation. People who had developed their own coping strategies, their own ways of surviving in a world that constantly hurt. I learned that some mirror-touch synesthetes become doctors or nurses, using their enhanced empathy to better care for patients. Others become therapists, artists, writers, channeling their intense emotional experiences into healing or creative work. A few even become professional caregivers, their ability to literally feel others' pain making them extraordinarily compassionate. But I also learned that many struggle with depression, anxiety, and social isolation. The constant bombardment of others' physical and emotional pain takes a toll. Suicide rates among people with extreme empathy disorders are higher than the general population. We're canaries in coal mines, too sensitive for the world we're born into. Sarah and I married 2 years later, in a small ceremony with just immediate family present. Even that was challenging for me. Wedding preparations involved enough minor injuries and stress-related aches that I spent most of the engagement period dealing with phantom pain. But Sarah was patient, understanding, protective. She'd learned to shield me from others' physical trauma while still allowing me to experience joy, love, connection. Our honeymoon was a carefully planned trip to a meditation retreat in Costa Rica. Surrounded by people focused on inner peace rather than physical exertion, I experienced the most relaxed week of my adult life. For 7 days, I felt minimal phantom pain. My nervous system finally got a chance to rest. That's when Sarah suggested something that changed the trajectory of my life entirely. What if you wrote about this? I'd been a freelance writer for years, but I'd stuck to safe topics. Travel articles, book reviews, lifestyle pieces. Nothing too personal. Nothing that might expose my condition or trigger painful memories. But Sarah was right. I had a story that needed telling, a perspective that could help others understand what it's like to live with extreme empathy. I started with a blog post. Just a few hundred words about mirror-touch synesthesia, written from personal experience. I expected maybe a few readers, possibly some skeptical comments. Instead, the post went viral. Thousands of people shared it, commented on it, reached out with their own stories. Some were fellow mirror-touch synesthetes who'd never had a name for their experience. Others were family members trying to understand loved ones with the condition. Medical professionals expressed interest in learning more. Researchers contacted me about participating in studies. Most surprisingly, many of the responses came from people who didn't have mirror-touch synesthesia, but felt deeply connected to the experience of overwhelming empathy. Parents who felt their children's pain too intensely. Healthcare workers burned out from absorbing their patients' suffering. Activists who couldn't stop feeling the world's injustices in their bones. I realized that while my condition was rare, the experience of being overwhelmed by others' pain was actually quite common. We live in a world that often demands we suppress our empathy, that treats sensitivity as weakness, that expects us to function despite being constantly exposed to suffering. My neurological condition was just an extreme version of what many people experience emotionally. I started writing more. Articles about empathy, about sensitivity, about the challenges of caring too much in a harsh world. I wrote about coping strategies, about building supportive relationships, about finding ways to use overwhelming empathy constructively rather than letting it destroy you. The response was incredible. Editors started reaching out, asking for pieces on related topics. Speaking invitations followed. I found myself becoming an advocate for highly sensitive people, for those whose neurological or emotional makeup made them more susceptible to others' suffering. But success brought its own challenges. Public speaking triggered my synesthesia intensely. Standing in front of audiences meant being exposed to dozens of people's minor aches, pains, and discomforts simultaneously. Book signings involved shaking hands with strangers, risking unexpected contact with their physical experiences. I had to learn new coping mechanisms. Meditation became essential daily practice. I developed visualization techniques, imagining protective barriers around my nervous system. Sarah learned to serve as my buffer in social situations, helping me navigate crowds and interactions safely. The irony wasn't lost on me that writing about empathy required me to constantly expose myself to situations that triggered overwhelming empathy. But I'd found my purpose. My condition, which had isolated me for so many years, became the bridge that connected me to thousands of other people struggling with sensitivity and overwhelming care. My first book came out 3 years after that initial blog post. The Pain We Share, Living with Extreme Empathy, became a bestseller, not because people were fascinated by my rare neurological condition, but because so many readers recognized their own struggles in my story. The book tour was grueling from a synesthetic perspective. Airports, hotels, bookstores, constant exposure to other people's minor physical discomforts. But it was also deeply rewarding. At every stop, people approached me with their own stories. A nurse who'd quit her job because she couldn't stop feeling her patient's pain. A teacher who went home exhausted every day from absorbing her students' stress and minor injuries. A parent who couldn't watch their child play sports because every fall, every collision registered in their own body. I met other mirror-touch synesthetes too, people who'd spent years thinking they were alone with their condition. We shared strategies, compared experiences, built a community around our shared neurological quirk. Some had learned to use their condition professionally. One woman had become a massage therapist, using her ability to feel clients' muscle tension as a diagnostic tool. Another man worked with animals, his enhanced empathy making him extraordinarily effective at identifying and treating their pain. But we also talked about the dark side, the depression that comes from constant exposure to others' suffering, the relationships that couldn't survive the complexity of dating someone who literally feels your pain, the career limitations, the social isolation, the exhaustion that comes from a nervous system that never gets to rest. The book's success led to speaking engagements at medical conferences, universities, empathy research centers. I found myself explaining mirror-touch synesthesia to doctors who'd never heard of it, to researchers studying the neural basis of empathy, to therapists working with highly sensitive clients. Each presentation was physically challenging. being around large groups inevitably meant absorbing multiple people's minor aches and pains, but intellectually and emotionally fulfilling. I was helping expand understanding of a condition that affects millions of people to some degree, even if only a tiny percentage experience it as intensely as I do. The research community embraced my involvement. I participated in brain imaging studies showing scientists what mirror-touch synesthesia looks like neurologically. My brain scans revealed hyperactive mirror neuron networks, exactly what the researchers expected to find. But they also showed something unexpected. Areas of my brain associated with emotional processing were larger than average, suggesting that my enhanced physical empathy was connected to enhanced emotional empathy too. This finding had implications beyond mirror-touch synesthesia. It suggested that empathy isn't just a personality trait or learned behavior. It's neurologically based, with some brains literally wired to feel others' experiences more intensely. This research could help explain why some people become overwhelmed by others' emotions, why certain individuals are drawn to helping professions despite the emotional toll, why empathy fatigue is such a real and debilitating phenomenon. Working with researchers also helped me understand my condition better. I learned that mirror-touch synesthesia likely develops in early childhood, when the brain is still forming its neural connections. Some researchers theorize that it might serve an evolutionary purpose. Individuals with enhanced empathy might be better at caring for group members, identifying threats, responding to others' needs. This perspective helped me reframe my condition. Instead of seeing it as a neurological curse, I started viewing it as a different way of experiencing the world. Not better or worse than typical neurology, just different. Like being left-handed in a right-handed world, or seeing colors differently due to color blindness. A variation in human neurology that comes with both challenges and advantages. The advantages became clearer as I worked more with people who were struggling with overwhelming empathy. My literal experience of others' pain gave me credibility and understanding that typical therapists or counselors couldn't provide. When someone told me they felt physically sick from witnessing others suffering, I didn't dismiss it as metaphorical. I knew it could be physiologically real. I started developing workshops specifically for highly sensitive people, for healthcare workers dealing with empathy fatigue, for parents who felt overwhelmed by their children's pain. The techniques I'd learned to manage mirror-touch synesthesia, mindfulness, boundary setting, protective visualization, strategic withdrawal, turned out to be helpful for anyone dealing with overwhelming empathy. These workshops became the most meaningful part of my work. Seeing people learn to manage their sensitivity without losing their compassion, watching them develop strategies for caring without being consumed, helping them realize they weren't broken or weak. This felt like the purpose my condition had been preparing me for my entire life. Sarah often joked that I'd become a professional empath, which was both accurate and ironic. The very condition that had isolated me from others had become the foundation for deeper connection. The neurological quirk that had made normal relationships impossible had led me to relationships built on profound understanding and acceptance. We've been married 8 years now, and Sarah still amazes me with her patience and adaptability. She's learned to move through the world with my limitations in mind without making me feel like a burden. When we travel, she researches medical facilities along our route in case we encounter situations that trigger my synesthesia intensely. When we socialize, she helps buffer me from unexpected physical trauma while still allowing me to connect with people. Our relationship isn't typical, but it's deeply authentic. Sarah knows that when she's in pain, I truly understand what she's experiencing. When I comfort her, it comes from literal shared suffering, not just intellectual sympathy. Our empathy for each other is complete, reciprocal, genuine. We've talked about having children, but it's complicated. Pregnancy involves physical discomfort that I would experience along with Sarah. Childbirth would be traumatic for both of us. And then there's the question of whether our children might inherit mirror-touch synesthesia. Is it fair to bring someone into the world knowing they might face the same challenges I've navigated, but watching how my condition has ultimately enriched my life, how it's led to meaningful work and deep relationships? These concerns feel less overwhelming. If our children do have enhanced empathy, at least they'll have parents who understand, who can teach them coping strategies from an early age, who won't dismiss their experiences as dramatic or attention-seeking. The world needs people who feel deeply, who can't ignore others' suffering, who are motivated by empathy rather than self-interest. Yes, it's a difficult way to live. Yes, it requires careful management and strong support systems. But it also creates healers, advocates, artists, caregivers, people who make the world more compassionate. Looking back on my journey from isolated, overwhelmed child to connected, purposeful adult, I realized that my condition taught me something essential about human nature. We're all connected in ways we don't fully understand. We all impact each other more than we realize. We all carry each other's pain to some degree. Most people just don't feel it as literally as I do. My mirror-touch synesthesia forced me to acknowledge these connections, to develop strategies for managing them, to find ways to care without being destroyed by caring. In a world that often encourages emotional numbing, competitive individualism, and selective empathy, maybe we need more people who can't ignore others' pain. The condition that once made me feel like a freak, like someone too sensitive for this harsh world, has become my greatest strength. It's taught me that sensitivity isn't weakness. It's a form of intelligence, a way of processing information that most people miss. It's shown me that isolation isn't protection. Real safety comes from finding people who understand and accept your neurological reality. Most importantly, it's proven that even the most challenging aspects of our neurology can become sources of purpose and connection. The very traits that make us feel broken or different might be exactly what the world needs from us. I still feel others' pain every day. I still have to carefully manage my exposure to physical trauma. Still need quiet spaces and understanding partners. Still occasionally get overwhelmed by the constant input from others' bodies. But I no longer see this as a curse to be hidden or overcome. It's simply who I am, and who I am has turned out to be exactly who I was meant to be. The man who feels others' pain has learned that pain, when shared and understood, becomes more bearable for everyone involved. My hyperactive mirror neurons, which once seemed like a neurological mistake, have become a bridge connecting me to others who struggle with overwhelming empathy in all its forms. Sometimes what makes us feel most alone is actually what connects us most deeply to others. Sometimes our greatest weakness becomes our most powerful strength. Sometimes the very thing we want to change about ourselves is exactly what the world needs us to offer. I can feel your pain, yes, but I can also feel your healing. And maybe in a world that often seems numb to suffering, that's exactly the kind of person we need more of. If you enjoyed this video, please support the channel. Like, share, and subscribe. Please write a comment what you think about this video.